Welcome to the Safety Break, the Whitewater Rescue Podcast. We're here to share stories of real river accidents and rescues and find expert advice on how to solve the problems you might encounter in the Whitewater River environment. I'm your host, Jack Diddy, an emergency medicine physician, whitewater paddler, and wilderness medicine educator. Together, I hope we can celebrate successful rescues and learn from our mistakes in a supportive environment. If you have a story to share of a non-fatal accident or rescue, send me an email at thesafetybreak@gmail.com or contact me on our Facebook page, The Safety Break. If you like what you hear, hit the subscribe button and follow us on social media. I hope you learned something valuable in the show.
Let's show you the forecast cone. Again, the forecast does call for rapid intensification of this storm system, and they're considering it to be a Category 4 hurricane by this time tomorrow. It's no wonder why flash flooding is such a big concern. Remember, the tallest mountains on the east coast of the United States are in North Carolina, Tennessee, 5,000 to 6,000 feet at times. And when you're forcing all that moisture to rise and ascend, you're only going to squeeze out more of that rainfall and get it at higher rates as well. So a big-time dangerous flooding setup already has begun for North Carolina mountains and will continue all the way through Friday.
One of the last places that you'd think to encounter any problems from a hurricane is the Swannanoa Valley just east of Asheville. It's 250 miles to the closest coastline, and 400 miles to the site where Hurricane Helene made landfall in Florida last September. The valley is surrounded by tall mountains, including the southern crest of the Great Craggy and Black Mountains. This long ridgeline reaches heights of over 6,000 feet, almost 4,000 feet above the valley floor, and forms the headwaters of the Swannanoa River. Once this river has fully formed near the town of Black Mountain, it flows west towards the French Broad, passing through the town of Swannanoa and a neighborhood called Beacon Village. It's usually a small and peaceful stream, and of not too much interest for whitewater paddlers. It's shallow enough that on most days of the year you can easily wade across it. In the days leading up to the storm, the preceding rain bands moved north and met a stalled cold front, causing over 10 inches of rain to fall on the region. So before the hurricane even made landfall, the entire Swannanoa watershed was already fully saturated and even flooding in spots. Then, as the actual storm came in on Friday morning and hit that tall ridgeline, an additional 10 to 15 inches of rain fell in a very short period of time. This amount of rainfall had never before been seen in our lifetimes for this region. The wind did its damage as well. Trees were uprooted and toppled everywhere you looked, making most roads impassable. Communication systems failed, so if you needed help, you couldn't call for it. And even if you could call for it, the usual system of first responders couldn't get to you. With this normal system overwhelmed and paralyzed, the only people that could help you in an emergency were your neighbors. And that brings us to our story today. We're going to hear from two people who joined forces and acted selflessly and without hesitation to save their neighbors as the flood washed through and destroyed the Beacon Village neighborhood in Swannanoa. Now, some listeners may find portions of this episode to be disturbing, especially if you or your family experienced direct impacts from this storm. So please listen at your own discretion. We're going to hear first from John Arndt. John is a longtime whitewater paddler who lives in Swannanoa. He has been a frequent paddler of the Green River Narrows, the Chiowa, and the other regional staple whitewater runs. The morning of the storm, he woke up, casually stepped out onto his porch to enjoy his morning coffee, unaware of the scale of the disaster that was unfolding around him, and certainly not anticipating the epic day in store.
I just woke up. I went out on the front porch, and the street was kind of a little bit of a river. But I was kind of thinking to myself, oh, this isn't that bad. But, I might move my truck up on the lawn because it's like 2 feet higher than the street. So I moved my trucks up on the lawn just to make sure, just to make sure. And then I went out on the back porch, and I see this guy stealing my kayak. And he's my neighbor, and I'd never actually met him. Yeah, so I kind of like yelled at him, "Hey, what you doing?" And he said, "Sorry, man, some kids are drowning." And I was just like, "What?" So I got in like panic mode and grabbed my other kayak, And I yelled at him, "Hey, there's a paddle on top of that car." So he grabbed that, and I grabbed my life jacket, and I think I grabbed a spare life jacket, and my thread rope, and my paddle, and my skirt. And I threw some shoes on. I already had shorts on, and then I followed them down there, which is really only maybe 40 yards from my house. They go straight down like a 30-foot embankment, and that's where those houses are.
I got off work late, and I was asleep, and Maddie woke me up at like 9. It was like I can hear people yelling behind us in the house. Like I think they're on the roofs, like something bad is happening. So I kind of woke up like in a panic and was like, well, how bad is it? You know?
This is John's neighbor, Rob Cantrell. Rob had just recently moved into the neighborhood a few months before the storm and hadn't yet met many of his neighbors. Like John, he was caught off guard by the situation that morning.
And I walked outside with like no shoes on, just like in the work pants I had on yesterday and the shirt that I slept in, and was like super groggy. And then I started hearing the yelling. So I just like kind of panic set in, like just a giant wave of adrenaline. And I drive past John's house to get to my house. And he has like a big rack full of kayaks. So I just like kind of dropped everything and sprinted through the gravel and jumped his fence. And he's got 2 big dogs. They're sweet, but I didn't know him at the time. And just like vaulted his fence just to go get the kayaks. But he was out back, like standing on his porch. And he was kind of like, what the hell are you doing? And I was like, I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was something to the effect of like, people over there are in trouble. We need boats. And he dropped what he was doing too. That ran inside to get life jackets and everything else. And I just started like stealing his kayaks and throwing them over the fence. It's only like probably 200, 300 feet that we are apart, but just like as quickly as I could, I was just hauling kayaks over there. That was how it started.
John reached the water's edge and took in his first view of the catastrophe.
My jaw dropped. It blew me away. I just remember seeing houses, the roofs of houses, and the water was up at least to the gutters. It was over the gutters on some of them. And I was just like, oh my God. I never in my wildest dreams or nightmares would have thought that the water would have got that high. It had to have been 50 foot deep, right where the Swannanoa is, which is normally like 3 feet deep, I could hear people screaming. Right when I first saw it, I didn't see any people, but I could hear people screaming. It's all kind of a blur, to be honest. So there's 2 rows of houses, and it's basically a street in between the 2 rows of houses. I think there's 27 or 28 houses, something like that. But going down the street in between the houses, the water was, it was moving. There was stuff floating by, like sheds and tires and washing machines and couple cars, stuff like that. But it wasn't like booking. But on the backside of those houses, the water was raging.
Unlike John, Rob is not a whitewater paddler. Now, I assume most of the listeners to this podcast have some whitewater paddling experience, and sitting in a kayak seems very natural to us. But think back to that first time you tried it out, probably in a pool or a safe spot on a lake, and how unstable and unnerving those first few minutes in the boat can feel. For most people, it's a pretty humbling and difficult experience.
Well, I've never been in a kayak before. Yeah, I think John got out slightly before me because I was still trying to figure out how to sit in a kayak and not have it immediately tip over. Apparently, you're supposed to have like a skirt, and I did not have one of those.
I think I gave him a few brief instructions. Like I asked, hey, have you ever kayaked before? And he said no. And I think I gave him a few brief instructions that probably meant, I think I said, watch your edge or something like he knows what that is.
While Rob was sorting this out and getting a feel for the boat, John paddled out into the flood.
I push off, and right immediately I had to do like the limbo under a power line. I'm like, I hope that isn't live. But I push off in that muddy water in between 2 houses. I get out there, I see some people on the roofs, and they're all just frantically pointing downstream. And I look down there and I'm like, oh man, because I see this lady holding on to a post of the side of her house, but it's all the way at the end, and you can see the water like really speed up and go around the corner into a bunch of trees. And I was like, I don't want to end up in those damn trees. But it just didn't look like where I wanted to go. But I had to go. So I went down there, and once I got down there, it wasn't as bad as it looked. So I think that was probably all day long. That was probably the most scared I was that first person I had to help, just because the water sped up into the trees but I got up to that lady. It wasn't as bad as I thought. There was an eddy kind of right there, and she wanted me to go in the house and get her dog. And I'm like, lady, there's like a foot of air in that house, probably not even a foot of air. I'm like, my kayak will float off. I mean, I could tie it to a post, but I just said, no, I got to get you to shore first. And then maybe I can come back and get the dog. And of course I didn't, there's people to be saved, but actually that dog lived. It somehow got out of the house and it lived. I don't know how. So she was pretty weak and tired, but she managed to hold on to my kayak. There's a couple times she kind of like let go, and I was like reaching back and grabbing her, but she did good. She managed to hang on, and I got her to shore. And she was really weak and tired. And then my other neighbors, Kim and Ariel, and some people I don't really remember their names, were there, and they helped her up. And they stayed there all day. They actually had ran some ropes down and set up like a little system to help pull these people up.
As John was making his first rescue, Rob had quickly figured out the boat and entered the water as well.
It's pretty easy to paddle. I got to the first roof, and I talked to my neighbors that I'm close with now still. It's a crazy way to meet your neighbors. But they were like, we have dogs in our attic. And then they were also like, there's people in their attics across this like ripping current. The like, not cars, but like outbuildings and stuff it's floating in it. And this crazy current is changing directions. So it's like an outbuilding floats up and then it floats back down. And just the wind and the rain it's pretty intense once you were out there. But yeah, I kind of went into triage mode and like prioritized like, well, if there's people in their roofs, they're more important than your dogs in the roof. Because I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought that the houses with enough time were going to start breaking up their foundations and floating down too. It's better to be outside of your house when it floats away than inside of your house. So I pretty much immediately turned around and then went into my shed to go get like an axe. Yeah, I picked the house that was closest. I got across that like ripping current with the shit floating in it, and then got out onto their roof. I am smart enough to pull the kayak onto the roof too. I knew that like I can't lose that thing. And then I just started hacking away. I just like kind of hacked away at this guy's roof, like pretty high up near like the actual ridge of the roof, which was a bad idea because that guy was way bigger than I was. It's hard to pull him out of it, but like in the middle of it, I'm getting through. I'm like, I'm going to give you a few taps just so that I know I'm not going to hit you in the head with this axe. And, like just stand back and I'll cut a hole in your roof. And, in the middle of it, I have no shoes on. I have like nails and wood in my feet, just like flying on adrenaline. I see this outbuilding that at the time I was like, that's a full house, like float down, hit a tree, and then break apart. So I was like, shit, I better get to it like way faster than I am now. Cut like a man-sized hole out of the roof and then had some trouble getting that guy up and out. I mean, he probably weighed 230, 250. Like I'm 5'9", 180, I haven't worked out since I used to run. So it's like, I don't know how I got him out, but I was very sore the next day. Yeah. And then I paddled upstream to the other, like they were sticking plywood and stuff out of the rafters, like whatever they could, and just yelling help. And the next hole I cut was much farther down to like where their actual attic was, so they could crawl it themselves.
Both John and Rob continued into a series of similar rescues, with no time for rest in between.
Everybody started screaming at me and pointing the other direction. So I look up there and there's a guy in his 60s, and he's holding on to the gutter of the house. And then he's got his 80-year-old mother there in front of him. And he's got his legs, which he told me later, wrapped around the post of that's holding the roof, the porch roof up. Um, that was keeping them from floating away. And then the mother had one hand on the gutter with the son behind her, and her other arm was holding a cooler. Maybe that's how they floated around to wherever they were holding on. I don't know. But we get over there. I asked if the lady could hold on to the kayak, and she couldn't even hardly talk. But the son said no, she can't.
Rob also saw this situation unfolding and paddled over to help.
I held John's kayak stable while he got up onto the roof, and then he pulled his up. He kind of held mine stable while I got onto the roof, and then we both grabbed her arms, and we were like, we just have to give her a pull. Like, maybe her arms come off, but like, she's got to get out of the water. She was like hypothermic. It was cold. I mean, it was like, it gets cold fast in Western North Carolina. I was worried we were going to deglove her arms. Like, she's old, you know? But I just looked at him. I was like, we have no choice, you know?
You know, she was a little bit heavier, and, you know, the physics of it. You can't lift, you know, with your arms straight out. So we did the best we could, and we got her up, but she was screaming and screaming, and we just had to ignore it and just keep pulling and pulling because she was going to die. There's no way that she could swim to shore, and I don't think they could have held on for another couple hours until the water dropped. So, anyways, we got her up there, and we were both just gassed after that. And her legs were hanging off. And we're like, she's stable. Let's just rest a minute. And then Rob started puking.
In another testament to his selflessness and courage in this situation, it turns out that Rob was dealing with more than just exhaustion from his late night at work.
He was out in bare feet and shorts, I think, if I remember right. And he had a diabetic pump on. And he just ripped that off because you can't get it wet. So he was helping me all day without his insulin. He was throwing up, and I thought he was just throwing up from his nerves, but it turns out it was he wasn't getting his insulin.
My blood sugar was high, but in the middle of it, you know, I'd drop someone off at shore and I'd go inside, I'd hook it back up, and I'd wait the 30 seconds to like bolus more because I could just feel like you can kind of feel like the sugar in your lungs, like it's when it doesn't break down, it's like your blood is thick, and so it's one of those weird, like, it might be psychosomatic, but yeah, dry mouth, the urge to pee, and it's like I know I need insulin, but I'm also going to go back out there.
After we got that lady on the roof, I went around and got her son, who's in his 60s, and he's a really big guy. He was pretty weak, but he was able to hold on to it, but he's too weak to really kick. And about halfway to shore, I don't know how far I had to go, maybe 80 yards. About halfway to shore, I was gassed. I was completely out of breath. And I mean, I'm 48 and I got some health problems and I smoked, and but it looked like I was kind of going over like a shed roof, and I'm like, "Hey man, can you put your feet down? Can you feel anything?" And he's like, yeah, I feel a roof. I'm like, "Can you stand up?" Because I was so tired, dude. We were about to both float off down the river, and he was able to stand up, and then he was able to walk up, kind of up on the roof of this house. So I managed to get him on a roof. The rooftops on the backside of those houses, I knew they weren't going to go anywhere, so I was comfortable leaving them there. The ones on the other side of the street, the water was raging so fast that those were the people I was really worried about, because you didn't know if those houses were going to stay put. So I left them there and and just started helping people. I went over to some other people, and they kind of declined the kayak ride. There's 3 of them. And then shortly after that, a house comes by, a house or a giant shed or something comes by and just goes bam, bam, crash, bam, 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 along the backside of all those houses. And it was ripping like the porches off the houses. And it was really, really loud. And then they were like, yeah, we'll take that kayak right now. So they changed their mind because you know. And I'm like, that's probably a good idea. And I started paddling them one by one. And right about then's when I actually I did hear people floating by on something screaming, and I went to the eddy line, the backside of the eddy line, to see, and I couldn't see what these people were on or where they were, but they were floating by screaming. And I thought about going after whoever these people were, but I would have been like a mile downriver by the time I caught up to them. So I made a choice just to stay there and help the people I could help. So that was probably the hardest choice of the day. But at the same time, looking back, there wasn't much of a choice. You know what I mean? And, they might have lived. I don't know. I don't know who they were, what they were. I could just hear them.
On a sad note, there were 42 flood-related deaths confirmed in Buncombe County alone, with most of these occurring in the Swannanoa River watershed. Many of the affected homes were not even located in a historical floodplain, so the victims were not really anticipating the problem. The flood hit as many people were just waking up that morning, and survivors reported that the water level rose so quickly that by the time they realized it was entering their homes, it was just too late to get out. Despite fatigue and the other physical hardships, John and Rob kept pushing forward to help. But the instability of the kayak almost led to a real disaster as Rob tried to pull a young family to safety.
Water up to the gutters means that, like, all the hornets' nests that have, like, gotten really set in and big over the summer are, like, they're pissed. So I was just getting stung by hornets, getting wood and splinters and nails in my feet, and trying not to lose my axe while I'm paddling an unfamiliar boat. The whole time, John's saying stuff like, the kayaks are tippy. This one's especially tippy. Yeah, I flipped 2 or 3 times, and I'm holding this boat full of water. I don't know that there's a drain plug. I probably could have figured it out if I wasn't flying so high. Yeah, John had to come by and save his own boat like 2 or 3 times. But John had more kayaks than he did paddles. So I was like, well, I can hook this kayak in the back up, and then because I knew that these people had an infant and like a 7-year-old. I was like, I can hook this up and I could put the mom in there because I don't want to take responsibility for her child, So I was like, telling her, I was like, if you can hand me the baby and you can get into this kayak that's attached to mine, then I can paddle both of us to shore after I hand you your baby back. And she started to get into the kayak and it just went down, and she grabbed the back of mine and pulled me down too. So I started filling with water, and like my legs are crammed into this boat with an axe like in between them, and I have her baby. And so I'm like, well, the baby can't go in the water, so I'm just drowning, holding this baby up. Like it is shit water. Like there's broken porta potties that have come from somewhere upstream. There's gas from cars. There's oil from cars. It's shit water. And I'm just holding this baby up like, well, it's not out of the water. And I'm like wrist deep, just actively sinking. And eventually her husband comes down and grabs the baby. And then I'm able to get out and then get onto the roof.
And I had somebody hanging onto my kayak, and I looked over and I'm like, oh, that's bad. But, all these alarms are going off right and left, and you can't hear. The water was raging. You can't hardly hear, so I couldn't yell at them. So I had to just ignore that. And I got whoever I was paddling to shore, and I went back over there, and right when they got in view, I saw them all tip over. So luckily they were in between 2 houses, so it was like an eddy.
Somehow that back kayak turned over and it had a little bit of air in it, and John was able to kind of shove it up onto the roof, and we were able to get it functional again. We left it on that roof for the rest of the day. I was like, this was a horrible idea to try to do this.
And actually, I think right about then that lady handed me her kid because he was shivering and his lips were blue. He was in a diaper, and these people were all scared and wet, and so blue lips was a common thing. But I paddled that kid to shore, and there were some girls that grabbed that kid from me. I'll never forget the way he felt. And then I think Rob got the other kid.
We took a few dogs. That baby, their 7-year-old, we swam them in. The wife actually was like, "Is that my dog?" And then started swimming away, and she just swam to shore with a life jacket. So I took the husband on the back of the boat. Yeah, and then I mean, besides that, I was just exhausted. So like, there was not a lot else I could really do.
It was just an insane day, man. I would be in there's a little eddy in between houses, and I'd be sitting there with the people on my boats and about ready to take off, and I'd be like, "Oh, here comes the shed. Just a minute," and then "Oh, here comes the tires. Let's wait a minute," So it was just insanity, and there was one part during all of it where I was like, "Am I going to get somebody killed? Should I just leave these people be and leave them on the rooftops?" Because at that point, I think I realized the water was dropping a little bit. And so I'm like, maybe I should just leave these people be, but they were all shivering. There's still stuff crashing into their houses. So I just kept at it.
As the day wore on, there was still the concern about the elderly woman stuck on her roof in a precarious position with her legs partially in the water.
There was the person that really saved that old woman. It was a random kayaker. So like, he just came out of nowhere and was like, "Who's in the most trouble?" And we were like, "That lady."
I went over to check on the lady that was up on the roof, and I saw that kayaker. That I think his name's Ben. I'm not positive. And he was doing things the right way. He had a rope system set up in between one of the houses, and he was setting it up to, like belay the people over, have them hold on the rope. I don't know, but he was doing things the right way. He obviously knew his stuff. And I went over, started talking to him, and basically we decided that the old lady on the roof was the main priority because her lips are blue and she was unresponsive. So me and Rob helped him up on the roof. Oh, I remember also there was a shed that was hung up on a power line. I was worried that power line was going to break and it was going to rip that lady's legs off because it was right there by her and barely being supported by this power line. So we helped him up on the roof, and he somehow managed to make some type of mechanical, something kind of like a Z-drag off the chimney, and he pulled her up. And me and Rob could barely even move her. So he did that by himself, which was pretty amazing. He didn't actually set up a Z-drag, but something like that. I think he said that he just kept talking her into just moving one leg at a time, one arm at a time, and then he would pull a little. But he got her legs out of the way of the shed, and I had ran back and got some blankets and tarps and handed them up to him and wrapped her up like a burrito. And he stayed up there and kept her awake the whole time. But I think it saved her life. I think he did. I really do.
Eventually, the water level started to drop, and most of the victims were in stable positions on dry land.
John kicked me out of the water. He's like, "It's getting low. You're exhausted. You need to not be in here anymore." Of course, the first thing I do is I go inside and I crack a beer. And then I'm like, well, let's go see how bad the rest of the neighborhood is, because my phone doesn't work. I'm trying to call some of my coworkers. So we just start walking down the road and we see some cops like standing around. And we go up and we're like, "Hey, there's people that need rescue services." And we kind of jog them back to my house and show them where it was. And then shortly after, the fire department showed up.
Search and rescue out there about 6:30. And they were actually from Wilmington, they said. They weren't even from around here, and they looked tired. They told me that they had to be rescued themselves. They'd flipped their nice motorized raft on the other side of the river.
This swiftwater rescue crew had a raft and a ladder and were able to safely extricate the woman from her roof. Meanwhile, John continued his efforts to sift through all the wreckage.
I was going, when the water got down to where you could wade, I was going through all the houses looking for people, survivors or bodies or animals. And once the water had dropped to where I couldn't kayak, I was running into like fences and stuff. So then I started wading around and checking all the houses, and It was so jumbled up in those houses. I stepped through a fish tank and got all these cuts all over my legs. And you had to like climb up. I should have took more pictures. It looked like a muddy tornado hit each house. But I had to go through them looking for people and animals and stuff. It was a tough break for all those people. There was one guy that he had actually jumped off the roof and swam to shore. So I went in and helped him for like 40 minutes, dig through the mud. There's about 2 foot of water in the house and mud, looking for his wallet, and we couldn't find it. But it just reminded me that, like, that guy had lost his wallet, his phone, his house, and his car, and everything he owned all in one day. You know, he was in shorts and a t-shirt. There's this other girl, I went in the house and searched through rubble and found a pair of muddy shoes she could put on, you know. So those people lost everything. The lucky ones were the ones that had their cell phone with them, you know. They lost everything but their cell phone, you know. It's crazy.
All told that day, John and Rob pulled almost an entire neighborhood of people to safety, and it really brought them all together like never before.
Supposedly we got 17 people off the rooftops, and then we got a bunch of dogs and cats, and even a bearded dragon. Yeah, they all came up, gave me hugs and stuff. That night, we all had a big bonfire and drank a bunch of moonshine, and just the whole neighborhood got like really tight afterwards, which I think you saw everywhere in Western North Carolina. But that's pretty cool. If there's one good thing that's come out of it, it's just everybody helping everybody out. It's nice.
Rob was quick to credit John's steady guidance and support that day.
Yeah, I mean, if there was someone to do it with, it would be John. You know, I wouldn't have nearly the confidence that I did have to get out there if I thought I was fully alone, you know.
As for Rob, I can't imagine a more intense and dangerous introduction to whitewater paddling. Floods have weird and powerful currents, zero visibility of obstructions under the water, and just unseen debris and dangers lurking everywhere. He truly risked his life for those people. And his selfless deeds for his neighbors didn't stop there.
And then the adrenaline didn't stop for another 2-ish weeks. I mean, I'm a cook, so like I knew that my neighbor's also a cook, Kim. You know, he has this food truck, so they set up a little area to cook like people breakfast because we had all these volunteers showing up to like gut these houses and try to save them. And then, you know, I took my wife and my dog to safety in Raleigh where her parents live, and I just stole my mother-in-law's Costco card and started like loading stuff up at Costco and just driving it back. And the roads were all messed up, so it was like a 12-hour trip. Every other day I was like cooking in the morning, leaving Kim set up with his stuff, and then driving back to Raleigh to go sleep and shower and then come back with more food and supplies. We did the same for Blunt's Pretzels. Like it was a little Bavarian pretzel shop, and World Central Kitchen got with them pretty early, and some really amazing people set up kitchens there. And then I showed up as relief to be like, here's more food, and I can also cook these 3 meals for the 200, 300 people that you're helping a day. So yeah, I was just flying high, you know, just like there's always something to do. So yeah, it was great. It was like we had no cell signal, there was no communications, and it's like everyone just came together.
What Rob describes was a common experience for many in the region. In the first few weeks after the storm, most of us didn't have access to social media or much outside communication, and there was so much immediate work to be done. Without this outside influence, neighbors joined together to help each other through it all, and the usual divisions that seemed to affect us so much in the last few years were briefly washed away. So much of this division dominates the news cycle and our social media activities, and this story to me is a small beacon of hope in that bleak landscape. 2 people setting aside their concerns for their own well-being and rushing out into a dangerous flood to help their neighbors, without regard to any of their beliefs or differences. Hopefully this story can inspire us to put down our phones for a bit and go hang out with our neighbors. I'll bet by and large they're mostly decent people. With this episode, I also wanted to recognize the courage and fortitude of John and Rob. and all the others that helped out that day in Beacon Village, and to celebrate these successful and amazing rescues. But in this celebration, there's also the grim reality of the difficulties the flood victims in this story faced then and still now. It's really hard to imagine what it might be like to lose your home to a flood. I remember being out for an evening walk a few days after the storm, and just trying to imagine walking back home to a place that no longer exists. With the loss of comfort and shelter, the loss of all the material things, the keepsakes, photos, clothes, tools, documents, all the things that allow us to function in our lives. For many of the people in Beacon Village, the process of rebuilding their lives after the hurricane is still a daily struggle, and they can still use our help. There's a website called SaveBeaconVillage.org, which describes their continued efforts to rebuild, and describes how you can help with donations or services. I'll have the website link on our Facebook site. Huge thanks to John Arndt and Rob Cantrell for the story with us today, and for sharing their personal struggles and thoughts of this incredibly stressful event. Rob told me that he's not planning on pursuing his whitewater paddling career any further, but he's currently teaming up with another local chef to create a restaurant called Bev's in Black Mountain, with a planned opening sometime in January. He describes it as a steakhouse with Japanese and French influences. If you like good food and want to show some support to Rob for his efforts, head out that way once it's up and running. I hope to see you there. Thank you for listening to The Safety Break, the Whitewater Rescue Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button and click follow on our Facebook page so we know that you're out there. I'm also looking for more stories. If you know of an interesting non-fatal river accident or rescue, send me a few details by email, safetybreak@gmail.com. It doesn't have to be dramatic or life-threatening, just something that we all might be able to learn from. I'll see if we can turn it into an episode. Stay safe out there, and I hope to see you on the river.